like agencies say they're adding emerging technologies like AI every day to improve efficiency and service delivery. Some agencies say they're finding, though, that those emerging technologies can also introduce new challenges. Here to take a look at AI strategies, Adarryl Roberts, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Logistics Agency, and Jonathan Alboum, Federal Chief Technology Officer at ServiceNow and former CIO at USDA. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Adarryl, you at DLA have been on the AI journey for a long time before the AI executive order. How has that impacted the direction that you've taken, the way that you're looking at AI at DLA, if at all?
So I think it's allowed us to accelerate what we're doing from an AI implementation perspective, the guidance in terms of using innovation, speed, and accounting for risk and compliance. We had those factors before, but for us, the need to implement AI from an interoperability perspective, because we are a combat support agency for logistics. So working with the services, the co-coms in terms of logistics, supply chain management, that allowed us to get better governance and interoperability from a governance perspective. And so that led us to form a analytics AI center of excellence, so we could coalesce all of our energies and focus on what I would consider strategic outcomes. We didn't focus on ChatGPT and things of that nature first, but really because of the investment, how do we get outcomes that increase readiness, enable readiness and effectiveness of our supply chain operations? How do we better predict our cash position in order to support the services? And how do we accelerate our procurement? We already had automation. We did about 10,000 contracts per day. But how do we use that to accelerate what we do and keep things in an automated fashion for our agency?
When you stood up the AI Center of Excellence, how did you determine what you wanted the outcome of that Center of Excellence? So what was the deliverable that you and your colleagues decided that would
So the first thing was data acumen, digital acumen, having a digital first mentality. That wasn't something that is pervasive across the agency. We had our, what I would call our centers of excellence, pockets of excellence. So we wanted to level set from a data acumen perspective. Why are we doing AI? Why are we investing in analytics and technology at Echelon? So the worker within the warehouse, our procurement analysts, our business analysts understood why we were making that investment. And then we also wanted to make sure they understood this wasn't a technology implementation for us. This was really a workforce multiplier in terms of how do we use AI to increase the effectiveness of our workforce moving forward. So we refer to them as our digital assistants, virtual assistants, employees when we look at AI, and train the leadership. So you can't request AI throughout your workforce if you don't understand it yourself. So we started with the top-down approach with AI to say, how do we get our acumen at a certain level so it can really start working on those really hard problems that have very effective strategic outcomes.
Jonathan, welcome. You and I have spoken about AI a number of times over the years. A lot of the concepts that we've talked about on this program already and that Adarryl just mentioned are things that you and I have discussed in the past. What are the big building blocks that you see for successful organizations that are getting into this space?
So I think Adarryl made a great point that they started with mission outcomes in mind. So it's very tempting in this moment to buy an AI product and be able to say, hey, we have AI. But if it's not positioned in a way that people are going to notice, driving a tangible outcome and making a difference in the way they do their jobs, people are going to wonder, well, what's the real mission value? It's nice and it's great that we can say we have it, but how does it help me do my job? So the mission outcome, and the second thing Adarryl said that I completely agree with is you have to think about it as a workforce multiplier. And whether it is an AI agent or it's an assist that is given to an employee as they're trying to perform a function, a recommendation perhaps, those are the things that make us more productive. And, it's not a secret that we have less resources today than we did in the past. We have fewer people, our budgets are smaller. So how do we take advantage of these technologies to overcome that and create the more efficient government that we've been talking about for many years? And, what Adarryl's doing, what other agencies are doing are definitely demonstrating that it's possible. I think the challenge that we're going to have as a federal IT community is to continue the momentum. And as we encounter challenges, because there's always challenges with these technologies, let's, as a community, figure out ways to overcome these and continue to push forward, because all it takes is one bad headline, one story, and we stop in our tracks. But this is too big and too important for that to happen. So we just have to be prepared for the ways that we work together to overcome those challenges and really demonstrate the value and show that productivity increase.
I went back and listened to one of the first podcast interviews that you and I did about AI when agencies first started to wrestle with this, I want to say 2 or 2.5 years ago. And I asked you there, what questions should people in agencies be asking that you're not sure they're asking? And you said, what's the point? And I said, what do you mean by that? And you said, what's the mission delivery outcome? So that's still a very prescient way of looking at this.
And it's always been, and it always will be for anybody who works in government, from IT to procurement, HR, you're in the mission, what have you. If your work doesn't align with an outcome, whether you're helping an internal customer or a member of the public, the question that you're going to get, certainly as a leader, is, well, why are you doing this work if it doesn't drive mission effectiveness, if it doesn't support the delivery of a benefit, so on and so forth. So we're trained that way as leaders in government.
And that leadership acumen that you described a moment ago then, based on what Jonathan just said, sounds like maybe the smartest of all the smart things that you did, because that gets then that leader going, oh, well, this technology could help us do X. I imagine you had a number of those instances.
Oh, absolutely. It's changing the way we recruit for our workforce. How do we upskill and train our workforce? That's at the forefront of what we're doing, because this is one of the technology investments where, from a government perspective, we don't want to outsource the use of this. We want to work with software technology companies, cloud companies to use the native tools and really learn how to do this ourselves. So when you look at one of the Secretary of War's priorities, it was, how do you bring some of that work back into government so it's more sustainable? We don't outsource warfighting. We shouldn't outsource logistics. And so that's a focus for us, is how are we using these technologies to actually upskill and train our workforce so we maintain some of these models on our own.
You're in an interesting spot at DLA to do this work too, I think, Adarryl, because you're directly supporting warfighters, and yet you also have a lot of what I think a lot of organizations would call back office type functions as well. Does the way that you approach AI for each side of that differ, or because the ultimate mission to support the warfighter is the same, you kind of take the same approach to kind of both sides of the house, I guess?
So I think we take a collective approach. What it's allowed us to do is really start with the problem we're solving for. To Jonathan's point, you don't want to do AI for the sake of doing AI. What's the point? And for DLA, we get requisitions in, requests in, so there's customer service aspects. There's the acquisition procurement part of that. How do you pay for it? How do you actually buy the product, work with the vendor, that interoperability, and then distribution of those products. And what's unique to us, we actually dispose of products as well. So as the services are finished with the life cycle of weapon system and other things, we're responsible for the disposal of that. And so we've looked at it holistically end to end to say, what problems do we need to solve for strategically? And how does that interoperability and collaboration need to occur between a lot of those back office functions along with our blue collar workforce?
And I asked that question, Jonathan, because I imagine there are a lot of organizations out there that think, well, this part of the organization does this. You had this at USDA. This bureau does this bureau does something completely different. So maybe that's going to require a different strategy or different approach or different whatever. And that's not always the case.
No, it might, but it's not always the case. And I think having an open mind about how technology can serve multiple mission areas, you need to have that at the CIO level, and you certainly need leadership inside the bureaus and sub-organizations to have that perspective as well. It's very easy for someone to say, no, I'm different, I need my own. And that thinking has got us into the situation where we have a lot of technical debt and we have a lot of systems that do similar things. So it does require a different perspective at all levels of the organization. I think one way to bring about that kind of change is to recognize that the best ideas don't always come from the CIO. The best use of this AI technology are not things that would come from my office at USDA, perhaps. But we have so many good, smart people across government in the programs that have worked so hard to make these programs effective. They recognize that if they have a technology like AI, if they have AI agents, if they have generative AI technologies, they could be a lot more efficient. They could be a lot more effective in their work. They could cut costs. So we have to listen to them and create environments where their ideas can bubble up to the top quickly and they have a voice in the conversation. I think too often we in the IT community have said, well, it's a technology thing. Let us, lead the way. And I think, if anything, the AI moment is one that is an enterprise moment, and it requires top-down leadership from the very top of the agency through programs, of course, including the CIO and chief data officer, chief AI officer, and all of us, but it is a collective leadership moment.
I think your point's spot on, because that's part of our focus. How do we democratize and federate the use of AI outside of the CIO's shop? And so while we have a CDAO who's responsible for oversight, policy, compliance, we really want our warfighters at the edge to have the ability to get the training to actually use the AI more quickly. A lot of these tools, with a little bit of training, right, you can create very simple models, but where our value is where you have that cross collaboration that's required, the complex LLM models. That's where you really want the CIO leading that type of effort.
Adarryl, you were nodding very enthusiastically when he was talking, when Jonathan said the good ideas don't all come from the CIO shop. Where have you found good ideas? Where have you found good input from people across your organization, or does it really come from all over the organization?
It comes from all over the organization. We've created a governance process where we centralize the ideas, and I really start with the problem you're solving for. So a lot of our use cases, they're not just AI use cases. They involve some process reengineering. You have too many steps in the process, so how do you make it more efficient? Automation. How can you automate parts of the process, data collection, things of that nature, which ultimately feeds your AI model. So we get them from, the lowest levels of the workforce, and we get them from senior leaders, but it's really focusing on which ones are going to have high value strategic outcomes. That's what we're focused on now. We've put those in 3 categories. We called it catalysts: auditability, transparency, accountability of our operations and our supply chains. Forecaster, how do we get better demand planning and forecasting for what we need to acquire for the warfighter? And then optimizer, from business operations to the management of our supply chains. How are we going to optimize that using our AI?
Jonathan, I'm struck by the number of people like Adarryl that tell me that this is a business process modernization opportunity as well as an efficiency cost savings opportunity. Are you seeing that too?
100%. And I would add into that, it's an HR moment also, because as we adopt these technologies, there's a lot of change in how people are going to do their jobs. We need to make sure we have a workforce that has the right skill sets, and there are different skill sets. Interacting with a AI tool, a chat tool, requires language skills, not necessarily coding skills, right? So you have to, have employees trained the right way. And as we adopt more agentic AI technologies, and we have these, I think we'll have these hybrid teams of digital workers and human workers, we're really changing what the workforce looks like. And you're going to have digital workers from every technology in your organization has some AI agent capability. And as we incorporate those into a singular approach to solving a business problem, the work of the human worker is going to change. And we really need to help people through that change. It's going to be different. And I think that the HR leadership up and down in that organization really needs to be focused on this problem, and in partnership with the CIO and the chief procurement officer and everybody who's going to bring this technology into an agency. We need to be thinking about the people. It always comes back to the people, right? So we have to put them front and center at this time.
As if there were not enough things for you to collaborate with at DLA with your chief financial officer, your Chico, and the other executives in the suite. Here's another thing, Adarryl.
And we're partnered with our HR folks, not just for the training and upskilling of folks, but I think it also allows us to see where we have training gaps with our staff. We look at training AI models like we would train an employee, right? The same upkeep and training you would have to do to make an employee successful, you have the same effort for the AI. And we think that's going to help inform where we have those training gaps for our staff so they can be more effective, and where do we need to upskill and train them based on those gaps.
We're almost out of time for this part of the program, but to wrap up, Adarryl, do you have an opportunity to look over the horizon and think about what AI looks like at DLA 2 years from now, 5 years from now, or is the technology changing so rapidly and your use cases for it changing so rapidly that you're just kind of bearing down on what you've got in front of you today?
So I think our approach has been to look at the various types of AI. The use cases will change, but I think our strategy has been, how do we invest in agentic AI, generative AI, your chat GPT type AI, agent orchestration, to solve various problems. So our framework has been, how do we get the tools that give us the agility and flexibility to implement AI for various problem sets, and then focus on the problems that we would implement for each of those cases. And so I think we have a great framework that gives us the flexibility to be innovative and agile, as opposed to committing to one technology and having to adjust later.
Very quick final thought, Jonathan. Where do you tell people like Daryl at agencies, what should I be thinking about long view?
I think that he should be thinking about governance. All these tools that he's bringing in that are going to provide great value, support the mission, they're going to be less successful unless there's an overall program to manage not just the individual models, but the value that they're producing and whether or not they're still contributing successfully to the mission. It sounds like the governance conversation is happening, and I think that's a great sign at your agency. And that's a conversation that we are having continually with CIOs across government right now.
And if I could add one thing, the other part of that governance is staying close to the commercial partners and the vendors that are deploying technology. So as you make that investment, you understand their roadmap, and you're able to inform that roadmap, but also be able to utilize it once new technology is
great
at
point.
the forefront.